A lot of your ministry is going to happen in places like ER rooms, hospitals, nursing homes, under the guise of hospice. And so you need to prepare yourself and get to know how all of those things function. So here where I live, we have one hospital. So it was very easy for me when I moved here to introduce myself to the chaplains, to walk up and down the halls, get to know what was on what floor, where the nurses station was, where the ER was, kind of how that hospital functioned. I got to understand the rules of visitation so that I could get into that hospital when I needed to visit people, and I wasn't gonna break any of the rules. I was abiding by everything that they had set up. Here, I don't have to have a clergy card or an ID card to get into our hospital. But when I lived in Eaton, the Dayton hospitals, the neighboring town over, they did. They required that I had a photo ID, that I had to go in and fill out some paperwork, and they printed me one up. That anytime I was in that hospital, I had that visible up here on my chest so that they knew that I was a visiting clergy member. Um, that badge or just the relationship with the hospital really helps because there's times where maybe a door is closed and the general public or the family can't get beyond that, but the clergy can. Or maybe the family's in a private room and no visitation, but the clergy can get back there to be with the family. So visit your local hospital or hospitals, find their protocol, find their rules, get to know the lay of the hospital. You don't want to be called in for life and death emergency by a family, get to the hospital and have no clue where you are going. Um, in Lexington, we have UK, which is a huge hospital. And the first time I went there, I was just going to visit somebody, and they literally at the information desk handed me a map and highlighted the route that I was to take to get to the room for the person I was visiting. So put forth some effort, go and make those happen. Get your badge if you need a clergy badge. The other thing you need to do is I know you went to school for ministry, you studied ministry, you're working as a pastor. You didn't go to school to be a doctor, you didn't study medicine, but you need to get basic medical terminology. I had the privilege of working as a hospital chaplain for 1 year. I went in with like no medical background. I didn't have a clue when they would talk in medical terms, but the nurses and doctors I worked with were wonderful people, and they allowed me to ask questions. If I was in the room during a procedure, I could ask questions. They put things in very plain English for me, and they really gave me a wonderful education. So now I have some basics of when I go into a hospital and they start talking, I can kind of keep up and track with what's happening with the patient. Um, I would seek out your doctors, your nurses, any of your healthcare professionals that attend your church, and have them give you a crash course in medical terminology, in hospital protocol, so that when things happen and you're called to a hospital or ER, you're not going in blind. You have some knowledge, some background, kind of what to expect. And same with the ER, the hospital, or the nursing home. Find out how all of those things function. So when you're on scene, you kind of know how that works. You're going to be called into some hospice situations, and hospice can happen in a hospital or in a hospice facility or in the person's home. And understand when hospice gets called in, this is really end of life care. And so when you walk into a hospice situation, you're dealing with a patient who knows that their life is coming to an end. You're dealing with a family who is preparing to say goodbye to their loved one. And sometimes you walk into a hospice situation and the patient is unresponsive. They're still alive, they're still breathing, but they're unresponsive. So they may be on a feeding tube, they may be on oxygen. they can still hear you, but they're not going to respond. They're not going to have a conversation with you. They're probably losing weight. They may not look like they did when they were sitting in your pew, a couple of months earlier. So be prepared for the sights and the sounds and the smells of when you walk into a hospice situation when somebody is dying. And that's really true for the ER or for hospital visits or nursing homes. There's going to be some things you see. There's going to be some things that you smell that are maybe a little disturbing, maybe unpleasant, but be prepared for those things. And, if I'm going to be honest with you, if you don't have a very strong stomach, just prepare yourself for that and put on the best poker face you can. You know, be very considerate of the family. So no plugging your nose or waving your nose or what's that smell, or don't gag or start to barf. One of the tricks of the trade, if you know you're going into a situation where there's going to be some smells, a little Vicks vapor rub right across there, and that will help you. Um, but just understand that you may walk into a room that you're not expecting. I had that happen to me. There was a situation with a young guy in his early 20s. He had been shot multiple times. I got to the hospital probably 6 hours after it had happened, 8 hours after it happened, and they told me what room. I walked into this room and looked at the patient laying there and immediately walked out, went back to the nurse's station. I said, I think you've given me the wrong room. And they said, no, that's the person you're looking for. His body had reacted to being shot, and the stress and the trauma of all that had ballooned to probably almost twice his size. So the person I was looking for and this person laying in this bed looked very, very different. There was a lot of connections, breathing tube, and he'd been put in a ventilator, and there was tubes in his arms, and there was IV, and there was blood, and it was a pretty shocking scene. And so I had to walk back in to the room and just kind of, this is the person that I am looking for. So put forth some effort, prepare yourself, get to know the things about hospitals and ERs and nursing homes and hospice situations, and find people who can prepare you and journey with you, because you're going to find that this is going to take up a lot of your ministry, especially when you're in a church with older people, because we all get old, our bodies break down, and we eventually die. And so just prepare yourself, and know that every situation is going to be different, and you may walk into a hospital room to a completely new experience. But prepare yourself to walk into those situations with eyes wide open.